My name is Kevin Roislin. I'm an international student and scholar advisor, and I'm kind of the main advisor in the office, tasked with helping to organize resources for international students. None of the advisors in our office really can speak to tax issues, but that's why we have our other guests. But we're kind of we try to put the resources out there that will permit students to complete their filings. And so we can't do students taxes for them, but we can know where to point them. And so I will pass it off for Shui Fen to introduce it off.
Hi, my name is Shifan Zand. I am an international tax specialist with the University Payroll Services. So I represent the payroll office. So on our side is more regarding issues with tax withholding, tax reporting, and so on. So thank you. And I'll
I
pass it on to Professor Berg.
Yeah, so I'm Joyce Berg, and you heard Shifen call me Professor Berg. I'm retired from the university. But when I was at the university, I used to run the volunteer income tax program, and part of that was for international students. And I love it so much I can't leave, so I'm back, and I'm going to try to give you an overview of just the basics of US income tax so you can see how the pieces fit together and when you need to do particular things to make your life easier. Um, so let me get started. Should be able to click to the next slide. Okay, so the key points that we're going to talk about, there are a couple, and having a little trouble with my mouse. Here you go. So you may need to pay income taxes. I'm going to talk about how you figure out if you need to pay income taxes. But basically, if you have wages or scholarships, you are probably going to need to file a tax return. The system in the US for income taxes is called pay now and settle up after year end. And what that means is you will have money withheld from your taxes or from your paycheck. And then at the end of the year, you file a tax return and see if you owe more or less. If you owe some more money, you pay it. If you had too much withholding, you get it back as a refund. So it settles up at the end. And there are some things you should do now to get ready for tax season. Tax season, when you file your return, is after year end. It's going to be basically February through April 15th. But there are some things that you can do now so that your tax return is way easier to file. And I'm going to list those things here if I can get my mouse to cooperate. Okay. Oh, I have them on a different slide. I apologize. So I'm going to tell you what those things are on a different slide. And then the tax rules that you follow differ depending on whether you're a student or a scholar. That has to do with your visa type and how long you've been in the US. And what that means, it will help you know what category you are, but what it basically means is you have to be careful if you're asking your friends for help, because your friends may be a different visa type. They may have been in the US before you were in the US for the first time. So their tax return, even though they look like you and talk like you when you're talking about taxes, even though you might even have the same job, your returns could be very different if one person was in the US when they were a child, for instance, or if your visas are different types. And one last thing I'll talk about on another slide is that most software will not prepare the correct return for you if you're a non-resident. This is part of the reason we have the International Student VITA program. There are some versions of software that will prepare a correct non-resident return, and we'll give you some information about that at the International Student Vita website. So just a quick overview of US taxes. So there are a lot of kinds of taxes, by the way. When you go to the grocery store and buy groceries, you're paying a sales tax. If you buy clothes, you're paying a sales tax. This income tax is different. It's on your income. And as I mentioned, you'll file a tax return. So the US has an income tax. Most states also have separate state income taxes. What this means for you, since you're living in Iowa, is that you will file two tax returns, one for federal and one for state, and you will pay two kinds of taxes, federal income tax and state income tax. They work similarly in that both have withholding, and you settle up by filing a tax return. As I mentioned before, that we have a pay-as-you-go and settle up at year-end system, which means you're going to pay estimated federal taxes as the year unfolds. This is basically so that you don't owe a lot of money when you file your tax return. So that pay-as-you-go part is called withholding. If you're already being paid, you'll notice when you get your paycheck, if you look at your pay stub, there's might be money being withheld for federal and state taxes. When you file your tax return, and that again, that happens from between February and April 15th, so you have some time to do that after the close of the year. Your tax return basically settles up and makes sure you're paying the correct amount that you owe. So your tax return will calculate what your actual amount owed is. And if you have had too much withheld, you get your withholding back. If you haven't have enough withheld, you end up having to pay in. So the key things you should do now is first, think about whether you're going to have taxable income. If you're not going to have any taxable income, you don't need to do anything else, including listening to the rest of this presentation. Okay, but you probably want to wait at least a little while so you know what kinds of income are taxable. If you figure out that you are going to have taxable income, then there are some things that you should do like as soon to right now as you can. So basically, if you can do them before the end of October, your life will be much simpler. Okay, so if you have taxable income, first, make sure you have a Social Security number or ITIN. If you don't, or you don't even know what that means, the last slide in this presentation tells you how you can get information about how to get a Social Security number or ITIN, but this is your tax identification number. You need it to file a tax return. Make sure that the payroll office has your correct tax status, and by tax status, I mean they need to know on a special form called a W-4, whether you're a citizen, a resident alien, or a non-resident alien, and they need to know whether you're single or married, and they need to know how you want taxes withheld. All that information is on the W-4. Okay. You want to make sure that you have access to FNIS, the FNIS system. Shufen is going to talk about how you get access to that. She also is the one that you would talk to about your W-4. You want to, if you're covered by a tax treaty, you're going to want to make sure that you file tax treaty paperwork with the payroll office. You need to do this annually. Shufen will have more information for you about that also. And you want to check your federal and state withholding. And that's because the system is pay as you go. If you don't pay in enough as you're earning money, you will end up with a big tax bill. So we had some people last year that owed $600 or $700 when they filed their Iowa taxes. Money is hard to come up with at the last minute. So you want to make sure you're having the right amount withheld. It's just an issue of timing. It's either withheld now and you pay very little when you file your tax return, Or if you're under withheld now, then you're going to end up paying much more when you file your tax return. And I'll have a slide on a little bit about how to check what your state and federal withholding are. So who pays U.S. taxes? And basically everybody, citizens and non-citizens. In tax language, we call the non-citizens aliens. So you'll see there are two kinds of aliens. People called resident aliens, which means you've been in the U.S. long enough, basically, and you use the same tax rules as U.S. citizens, or you're classified as a non-resident alien and you use a different set of tax rules. So it's important to know, are you a resident or a non-resident for tax purposes, which I will talk about in a minute. You're going to pay taxes on your income. If you're, well, first, taxable income, it means basically any money or anything of value that you get that's not a loan or a gift from a relative or friend. So if you win a prize, that's taxable income. If you take out a student loan, you have to pay that back. So that's not taxable income. Citizens and residents pay tax on worldwide income. So if you're a resident alien, you're going to pay tax on money no matter where it comes from. If you're a non-resident alien for tax purposes, you're going to pay tax just on your U.S. source income. So another reason that it's important to know if you're a resident or a non-resident for tax purposes. It determines what tax you're going to pay and what you're going to pay tax on. So first important thing about tax residency is your tax status, your residency for tax purposes. It's not the same as your immigration status. You actually have to figure it out, and it's based on calendar years and what type of visa you are in the US with. Okay, so first, you're going to count calendar years, and you're going to count the calendar year, every calendar year that you've been in the US with an FJ, Q, or M visa, even if it's only for one day. So if you come in the US with your student visa just at the end of December before the spring semester starts, that even if you're only here for a couple of days in December, that makes that whole calendar year count as a year. And once you know how to count years, then there's a rule that tells you how to determine whether you're a non-resident or possibly a resident. So if you're a student, meaning you're on an F1 visa or a J1 visa where the subtype says student, if you count those calendar years and you've been in the US for fewer than 5 calendar years with an FJ, Q, or M visa, then you are a non-resident for tax purposes. So if this is the first time that you're in the US, this is your first year or your second year in the US, you are definitely a non-resident for tax purposes. If you count those calendar years and you've been in the US with your FJ, Q, or M visa more than 5 calendar years, you're going to apply a special test called the substantial presence test. And Shufen's going to tell you exactly what that is. If you're a scholar, the rules are different. I think most of you are students, so I'll just say the rule is different if you are a scholar. So what types of income are taxable in the US? The most common types of income for international students are wages, and that can be through the university or through an internship, and scholarships, if your scholarship amount is bigger than your tuition plus eligible fees plus your required course books. So often wages, and always wages, are taxable. Scholarships are taxable especially if it's a stipend for living. There's a couple other kinds of things that are taxable. And I haven't listed them all, but some that we've seen with international students: prizes that you win, non-bank interest, dividends, gains from selling stocks or bonds or other assets, and other kinds of income, though I understand from Kevin that as an international student, you're not supposed to have other kinds of income. So if you have a question about what are legitimate sources of income for you, Kevin would be the person to ask. I'm just trying to list things here that show you when, what might trigger that you need to file a tax return. And for international students, for people who are non-residents, for tax purposes, even if you don't owe any taxes, you still have to file a tax return. You might be covered by tax treaties, and these tax treaties are going to affect how much tax you owe. So the treaties change the amount of taxes that you pay. Treaties differ from country to country, and not every country has a tax treaty with the US. Treaties also differ depending on whether you're a student or a scholar, and I've just repeated here what the definition of student and scholar is according to the IRS. Even though we know that all students are scholars, to the IRS, you're a student. If you've got an F1 visa or your J1 visa says you're a student. Otherwise, you're considered a scholar for tax purposes. And how do you know if you might be covered by a tax treaty? There's two ways you can start to check yourself. One is to just Google IRS, United States income tax treaties, or just IRS tax treaties. And it will come up with this page, United States income tax treaties A through Z. And if you see your country listed, it means there is a tax treaty. And there may be a section in there that says for students or for scholars, and then you'll know you're covered by a tax treaty. These things are really hard to read because they're written in tax speak, and they're very hard to interpret, but it would at least let you know that you need to ask the payroll office about treaty information. The other way to find out is to look in publication, the IRS publication 519, which you would find by just Googling IRS Pub 519. If you look in the back, there's two appendices, one for students, one for scholars, that tell you if you're covered by a tax treaty. The list should be complete, but those IRS lists aren't always complete. So you'd want to probably verify both places. This is what I do, look at both sources. And then if you are covered by a tax treaty, you're going to want to email the payroll office to let them know. And this basically, this all means you might be covered by a tax treaty. Shifen will help you figure out whether you are covered by that tax treaty. Some of the I mentioned all the tax treaties differ across countries. They differ across whether you're a student or a scholar. Some of them last 1 year, some of them last 5 years, some of them last the entire time you're a non-resident, some of them continue into when you're a resident. So they're all very, very different, but Shifen is an expert at knowing these tax treaties. Okay, so if you're a non-resident, you want to, and even if you're a resident, you want to check your withholding. But this slide here, I mentioned some amounts that are specifically aimed at non-residents. So the way to check your withholding is to look at your pay stub. Every time you get paid, there's a document that tells you why you got paid the amount you got paid. It's available at the university self-service site. And I'm mentioning again here, so I'm repeating again, that the system is a settling up system, and you want to make sure that you are withheld approximately the right amount. You want to avoid a big tax bill. It's a hassle if that happens when you file your tax return. So for non-residents, a good rule of thumb, and this rule of thumb will make you a little bit over withheld. So you would get a smallish refund when you file your tax return. But you want to make sure about 14% of your wages are being withheld for federal taxes. Your federal tax rate is going to be somewhere between 10 and 12%. So withholding 14% makes sure you're withheld adequately. And you should also have about 5% withheld for Iowa. Iowa has several tax brackets. The highest one you would probably be in is about 5%. So if you withheld 14% of your wages for federal taxes, 5% of your wages for Iowa taxes, you're withheld about the right amount. And the same is true for scholarships. And Shufen will tell you scholarships, the university withholds federal tax, but they don't withhold Iowa tax. So you'll have to make sure you're withholding and not withholding, you're saving enough to pay that Iowa tax when it comes due when you file your tax return. Now, if you look at your pay stub and you're under withheld, you can correct it. You correct it by filing a new W-4 form and asking that more money be withheld. So you usually ask, like, withhold $50 more for federal tax, $10 more for state tax. It's a dollar amount you ask to be withheld. Okay, so how are you going to file your tax return? There's a lot of different options available to you. The first one I list is the International VITA program. VITA, by the way, stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. These are all, it's run by volunteers who are all trained through an IRS program to know the rules for international students. And I list this first because I know that people have the right training and they'll help you prepare the correct tax return. There's other software out there that will help you prepare the tax return, but be careful. Other software isn't as careful as your VITA volunteers are in determining whether you are a resident or a non-resident for tax purposes. Some of that software, for instance, really popular software is TurboTax. If you use TurboTax, it just assumes you're a citizen and prepares a citizen return for you, which is the wrong return. There are tax professionals. It says beware here. First, you need to pay them. And second, there are also some tax professionals that haven't ever prepared a non-resident return and don't even know to ask. So you need to be careful. If you choose to use a tax professional, at least ask, how many non-resident returns have you prepared? And they should be able to say, like, at least 50. Otherwise, I'd be personally a little scared. And not your friends. And I mentioned way at the beginning, that's because your friends are probably different from you as far as taxes go. Every single tax situation can end up with a different tax return. So you want to be careful if you're getting your only advice from your friends. And a warning, like I mentioned, there are special tax issues for international students and scholars. A lot of the commercial software, the big software companies, don't correctly prepare non-resident returns. The return, if you are non-resident for tax purposes, the return you're going to prepare is called a 1040-NR. It says 1040-NR right at the top. If someone prepares a return for you and it only says 1040 at the top, that's the wrong return. That's a return for a resident. So the International VITA program that we have, it's part of the Johnson County VITA program. I mentioned we have trained volunteers that are specialists in international student returns. We have separate VITA sites for international students because your returns are so different and require a different kind of thinking than citizen returns do. These sites are on campus. The sign up, so it's not by appointment, but by sign up. And the sign up opens in late January and you'll get email from the ISSS office. And also it'll be posted on their web pages to let you sign up for a session. And these sessions we help you prepare, excuse me, your own return. We show you where the software is that will work for you. Remember that these sessions are not at the Iowa City Public Library. There are also VITA sessions at the Iowa City Public Library, but they're for citizens or green card holders. The volunteers at those sites do not have the right training. They don't have enough training to help you. They will prepare a wrong return for you, or they will turn you away. So in either case, you've wasted your time and you don't want to take the chance of having a wrong return. So make sure you're connected with the on-campus international student VITA sites. Okay, and if you need more help, I've provided some email or some resources here for you. The last link, the IP VITA, is the International Student VITA Program. Excuse me. Payroll-NRA at uiowa.edu gets you to Shufen. Kevin Reisland gets you to Kevin. Now I'll turn it over to Shufen.
Thank you so much for Professor Birch for giving an overview of the income tax, the U.S. income tax, and also from the perspective of the year-end tax return process. And she has been a great access to to helping students with tax returns. So I represent the payroll office, and our responsibility is to make sure that we withhold taxes correctly from your payments and also report your income on the correct tax return at the end of the year. And since a lot of the topics on my presentations have already covered by Professor Birch, so I'm going to only pick a few slides that I think that will be beneficial to you. And on your payments that you may or may not see all these 4 types of tax withholdings. Yeah, when you receive a payment, you may or may not see all 4 types of tax withholding from your paychecks. Depends on different circumstances. So, for example, if you have applied for tax treaty exemption through our office, you may see no federal tax withholding, no Iowa tax withholding. But if you have become a resident alien for tax purpose, that you would likely see Social Security tax and Medicare tax withholding depends on different circumstances as well. So, for example, if you're enrolled as a full-time student, then you may not see the Social Security and Medicare tax withholding. So I will cover more on this, the Social Security and Medicare tax withholding. And I will go to the substantial presence test, which Professor Birch has already mentioned this. And there is a formula that it can be complex, that to calculate, we have a software actually. We have a software to help us to calculate this especially for a complex situation. But mentally calculate is by the calendar years, as what Professor Birch has already mentioned, that it depends on your visa type and the days that you have physically present in the U.S. So for students, for an F1 students, if you have been in the U.S. for this is, for example, if this is your first year that physically present in the U.S., you won't become a resident alien for tax purpose until 2029, which is the 6 years of physically present in the U.S. And if you have a job and have not signed up for direct deposit, you could do that through employee self-service. And if if you have not done so, you could also elect electronic delivery of the year-end tax form called W-2 form. And so I'm trying to show the paycheck review. When you go to the employee self-service, click on the paycheck view paycheck history, and the tax under the taxes withheld section, there is a column called current section, which is the tax withholding for the current pay period. And then the year to date, YTD is the year to date tax withholding. And on this paycheck, in this particular example, this student has a monthly job as a grad research assistant. And the student also has tax treaty exemption income. As you see that is noted federal non-resident alien 1042S, which means that the federal tax withholding is being exempt, no tax withholding. And then Iowa non-resident alien 1042S also has no withholding. And federal withholding, if the student has non-tax treaty income, then there should be a tax withholding for the federal withholding or Iowa withholding. That is non-tax treaty exemption income for regular salary. And so, and Professor Birch has already mentioned this W-4 form for non-resident alien employees. If you are categorized as a non-resident alien, you are required to file a paper W-4 form and send the complete W-4 form to our office. And the reason is because there are different rules applied to non-resident alien. So, and so that's why you are required to send the paper W-4 form to payroll. And on the W-4 form, we would like you to include only if you have received your social security number, we would like you to include only the last 4 digits of your social security number on the W-4 form. This is only for the security reason. But if you drop off your W-4 form in person in our office, that you are okay to provide include your full social security number on the W-4 form. If you have been in the U.S., so for example, F1 student have been in the U.S. for more than 5 years, and you have become a resident alien, and you should have access to online W-4 form. You can submit W-4 form through employee self-service. And you will click on the View Federal to submit federal W-4 form, and then View State to submit state W-4 form. And this slide I'm trying to emphasize that last year during the tax return seasons, we have heard from a lot of students and scholars saying that they owe Iowa tax because they are non-resident aliens, and there was a mass change to the Iowa income tax system, in which the non-resident aliens population tax was not being considered. So the non-resident aliens population that they reported owing Iowa tax the last tax return season. So if you did owe Iowa tax, we recommend that you submit an Iowa W-4 form, and on the line 7 of the Iowa W-4 form, request an additional tax withholding. So then you won't owe Iowa tax when you file your 2024 tax return the next tax season. Just a sample of the federal W-4, Iowa W-4, and Social Security and Medicare tax withholding. As mentioned earlier, that if you are considered a non-resident alien, you are exempt from Social Security and Medicare tax withholding. And if you have become a resident alien, but you enroll full-time as a full-time student and have been employed in a student position, that you will still be exempt from Social Security and Medicare tax withholding. We have seen a lot of the we have received a lot of questions, especially during the summer when students don't enroll full time at school. That's when they see the Social Security and Medicare tax withholding from their summer payment, which is the July 1st payment and August 1st payments. And you may qualify for refund if you enroll for at least 0 to 2 credit hours for the summer. And if you file we call it short hours form, which is not a short hours form for the International Student Office, is a short hours form for the registrar's office for the Social Security and Medicare tax exemption purpose. And we have a lot of information on our website, and you can log on to our website and get into more details there. If you have a job that is being paid monthly, you will receive a payment on the first of every month. And biweekly, you will get paid on every other Tuesday. Fellowships, and if you receive fellowship payments, and if you are a non-resident alien in F1 and J1 status, your fellowship payments are subject to 14% federal tax withholding if there's no tax treaty exemption. But these fellowship payments do not have Iowa tax withholding. So you may want to consider making an Iowa tax estimate tax payments to the state of Iowa, or you may see tax due at the end of the year when you file your tax return. And this type of fellowship payments are reported at the end of the year on a Form 1042-S. And we have a lot of information on our website about fellowship payment rules. Year-end taxes. So at the end of the year, before you file your tax return, before you attend the VITA workshops, you should get a form called W-2 form if you have a job that is paid salary, or you would have a 1042-S form if you have applied for tax treaty exemption through payroll office, or you receive a scholarship payments that are subject to 14% tax withholding. So you may have one form or two forms. It depends on the type of payments that you receive during the year. So especially at the end of the year, when students file the tax return, they're wondering whether they should have a W-2 form or should have a 1042-S form or should have both. So a lot of confusion there. So you may or may not have both W-2 and 1042-S form. If you have a W-2 form, and you can download it from the Employee Self-Service website, and if you have fellowship payments and you are a lawful permanent resident or resident alien, your fellowship payments are also on the Employee Self-Service website. But if you have a 1042-S form, the 1042-S form is not available on the employee self-service. We actually mail 1042-S form to all recipients through to their home address. And if you have elected electronic delivery on the Foreign National Information System, you would also receive an email from our office when your 1042-S form is available. And the next things that I'm going to go over is the Foreign National Information System. So if you have a job already and have started working, and you should have received an email from our office about filling out an online Foreign National Information form. The Foreign National Information form, the purpose is to collect immigration history, your U.S. present, how many days that you have been in the U.S. for tax purpose. We use the data to determine resident alien or non-resident alien, so then to withhold taxes properly from your pay. And also, if you would like to apply for tax treaty exemption, the Foreign National Information form is required. And you would the email that looks like this. At the bottom of the email, there's a username and password provided at the bottom of the email. And you click on the link and it will bring you to this site, and you enter your username and password. And after you log in, you should be prompted to this page that prompt you to change your password. And a lot of some students, they thought it was an error message, but it's actually a slide that asks them to reset the password. So once you reset your password, and you would come to this screen, and on this screen, that is where you would choose electronic delivery of your 1042-S form. So you would click on the first button, and for the other IRS forms and related summaries, you also click on the first button and click on continue. So this form has, and then after you log in under the data entry, you would go through and complete all these pages. There's one items that I wanted to mention. So when you get to this page, at the bottom, it asks you the first ever enter the USA. So you would enter the date when you first enter the USA. And on this page, you enter your US address and foreign address. And when you get to the visa immigration status history, there are instructions at the top that you are required to provide the visa immigration activities the past 3 calendar years, FJMOQ activities since January 1st, 1985. So if you have been in the U.S., for example, as F1 in 1990, for example, you are required to add records here, because that could impact the substantial presence test for calculation of you being a resident alien or non-resident alien. And so you would click on add new records, and the start day is actually not the program start day on your I-20, is the actual days that when you enter the US. End day is the program end day if you are F1 student, for F1 students. So F1 students, the primary purpose is either in studying in a degree program or studying in a non-degree program. When you're done completing the form, and make sure to go to the confirmation page and submit confirmation. There's one page that I missed. So here, the country of tax resident. So country of tax residence may or may not be your country of citizenship. So if this would determine if you would like to apply for tax treaty benefits, this would determine which country's tax treaties that you are eligible to. So for example, F1 students before arriving the US, you study in South Korea for more than 183 days, stay there for more than 183 days, and then return home maybe for only 1 month, and then you enter the US as an F1 student. Then we consider the South Korea, your tax resident country for tax treaty purpose. So for payroll purpose and if assuming that you have a job, make sure that you have submitted the W-4 form to payroll office and you have signed up for direct deposit. And when you have received your Social Security number, make sure that you let your department HR know that you have received your Social Security number, and you should have completed your foreign national information form. And we also have a payroll checklist on our website that you can reference it to throughout the year. Applying for tax treaty benefits. So for students who have already applied for tax treaty benefits this year, in late October, early November, you will receive an email from our office asking you to review your Phoenix data for update. If you don't, if the Phoenix data has not changed, you don't need to do anything. But if there's a change like address or immigration status has changed, you will be asked to contact us, contact payroll, that we grant you access again to the Phoenix form, and you would make update there. And then in late November and early December, and you will receive a second email again about the tax treaty renewal for next year, and you will come to our office and sign the tax treaty form. And students who have not applied for tax treaty benefit this year, if you are paid monthly, and you think that you are from a country that has a tax treaty with the US, and we ask you to send an email to our payroll-nra@uiowa.edu and with include an answer to these questions. Do you have a Social Security number? Have you completed your foreign national information form? If you are students, attach to the email your Form I-20 passport and I-94. If you're J-1 students, attach a Form DS 2019 passport and I-94. Students who are paid bi-weekly, no tax-free email inquiries needed. It's not because you're not eligible for tax treaty benefits. It's just because our payroll system is set up that way that we cannot grant tax treaty benefits to biweekly jobs. So in that case, students receive only biweekly payments. You would claim the treaty benefits on your tax return. And student from India, F1 student from India, the tax treaty works differently. So you also do not need to send us an email about the tax treaty benefits. And that's all I have.